With Rivian's Autonomy Day just around the corner, there seems to be one big question that everyone is asking. Are we finally done with the stupid pre-mapped highways? And I think the answer is yes, but also no. Pre-mapping is kind of important. Let's talk about it. This video is actually inspired by something that happened on my commute this morning. My vehicle seemed to be having some kind of connectivity issues. The AT&T service didn't seem to be working properly. Apple Music wasn't loading, hotspot wasn't working. Interestingly, it seems that something tied to that also caused the road information, the pre-mapped highway, to not work as well. I got maybe 2 or 3 miles down the highway before it said that there was no more road information available and highway assist disengaged. And I noticed something interesting when that happened. On the driver's display, normally it shows all of the vehicles in the next 2 lanes to the left and 2 lanes to the right, along with the lane markings. But when the road mapping disappeared, I also noticed that the lane markings outside of my own lane disappeared. It continued to show my own lane as normal, but the lane next over, nothing at all. So is that information coming from the map? Well, yes it is. So it's interesting to see what the mapping exactly is getting used for and why Rivian has been so dependent on it, and why I think that mapping is going to be a thing in the future, although it may look a little bit different. Before we can get into why the mapping is so important, we need to differentiate between different kinds of mapping. There's 2 basic types. There's SD mapping and HD mapping. SD mapping is like Google Maps or Apple Maps or whatever your navigation system is. This is basically just a basic map of where roads are, turn-by-turn directions, things like that. There's not a whole lot of detail about specific lanes or anything like that, really. HD mapping, on the other hand, is very much more information dense and much more precise. This is the kind of mapping that Rivian has been so dependent on. HD mapping has very specific information about exactly how many lanes are on a road, where the lanes are located, how wide the lanes are, location and height of curbs, things of that nature. So extremely high density, high information mapping. As a quick aside, if you find these videos useful or informative and you're thinking about buying a Rivian, use my referral code linked down below. It'll give you Rivian bucks or Rivian points or whatever they're called. You'll get a kickback for it. Okay, circling back to why Rivian is so reliant on these HD maps and what they do. You might be seeing where this is going, but it essentially helps the vehicle have an extremely precise idea of what the road is doing and where it's going ahead. Between GPS, using cameras for verification, and the mapping, the vehicle is able to locate exactly which lane on the highway it's on and where the trajectory of that is going. For example, when you're in an exit lane and it prompts you to take over, that's how it knows it's in an exit lane, is because of these HD maps. It also allows it to use it as sort of a crutch when the cameras aren't able to really tell what's going on. If, lane lines are faded or visibility is poor or anything like that. Historically, the Rivian system has very much been a map-first kind of system where it relies on these HD maps to figure out the trajectory and the speed and the behavior, even more so than the cameras in some cases. Not to say that the cameras aren't important, but it's just been less important than the map. However, it does seem that the tide is shifting on that. It seems since the Mobileye system has been disabled and we're using Rivian's Autonomy Platform, it does seem to be relying on its own perception or what it sees in the world a lot more than just the map. That said, the maps still very much are in use. It's able to tell exactly what turns are coming up. It's able to tell which lane you're in to prompt you to take over. Or, for example, as I saw this morning, it's able to tell how many lanes there are and what the lane markings sort of look like so it can visualize them on the display accurately. And honestly, that system works fine for the domain in which it operates. That said, it does have its limitations, and we've all experienced those limitations quite heavily. Things like road information not being available on the highways that we commute on. It could be things like construction zones that change the mapping of the highway so it doesn't match what is in the database, things like that. And so on the real world roads that we drive on, you can't rely on the maps that heavily. And the system shows it. It's been increasingly aware. But the big elephant in the room is the Geo-Lock. Even though it's becoming increasingly competent without that back-end mapping to lean on, it still very much will not operate if it does not have a good idea of the mapping. And I think this is going to be the big thing that we're going to see change very quickly. And I imagine we'll see a lot of that at Autonomy Day. We'll be able to see the real chops that this new perception system has, so it can lean more heavily on perception than it does on mapping. That said, mapping is not going away anytime soon. Even Tesla's FSD uses HD mapping in the background for its full self-driving system, even though it will drive on any road out there. The difference is the mapping is used as more of a double check, more of an alertness to give a local knowledge. Here's a great example of where something like that might come into play. In Utah, where I live, there are tons of intersections like this, where there's a lane that goes through a traffic light that's meant for turning into a business, and then the lane immediately ends. If you're not a local to the area, you might get into that lane and mistakenly realize that you're going to get forced over, and then you have to change lanes immediately after the light. If you're a local who drives that commute every day, you might know that it's better to get into this lane here so that you can go straight through and not worry about the merge. This is something that an HD map would have that an SD map would not. So HD mapping is still incredibly helpful for navigating the world and choosing the right lane as a local would. However, the system still needs to rely more heavily on the cameras and radars than it does on the HD mapping for real-world conditions, for example, construction or moving objects that wouldn't be part of a map. There are, of course, no guarantees for what we're going to see this upcoming Thursday, but all signs are pointing towards a new, more perception-heavy version of the highway assist system that we've seen. The universal hands-free system almost certainly relies more heavily on perception than on mapping. So while I don't think mapping is going away anytime soon, I think we're going to slowly start see the mapping become less and less emphasized and become more of a background check. It's not going to be an instant change. It's going to take a lot of time. But I think we'll gradually see this change, and it will honestly make the experience so much better. Oh, and one more thing. This is an AI and Autonomy Day event. A lot of people are talking about the autonomy. Not a lot of people are talking about the AI part. I do think it will be a less important part of the event, but it will still be there. Almost certainly when they're saying AI, they're probably referring to Gemini being integrated into the infotainment system, which they've already teased. Now, there's a lot of different directions they could go with this integration, and I'm very curious where they'll go with it. They could just do a full-blown Gemini as we know it on a Pixel phone, for example, where you speak with it like a personal assistant. It's connected to your Google account, and it knows your calendar, it knows your preferences, and it has connection to your smart home devices, all things like that. I would love it if it was that kind of integration. That said, it could also be a deeper integration within the Rivian ecosystem, where Gemini provides the back end, but it's not necessarily the Google account tied version of Gemini. This sort of approach would allow some really deep integration with the Rivian systems and could provide some really cool functionality. As an example, if it's cold outside and it's snowy, maybe Gemini could pull from the cameras and see this snowing outside and offer to you, hey, do you want me to turn on snow mode for you? Or you could say something like, hey, I don't want to go farther than what my battery has charged for, but I want to find a really good dinner. And it could look at exactly what your range is and what good dinner spots are within your area. That's a really stupid query. I hope no one asks that, but just an example of a really deeply integrated thing that Gemini might be able to do if it's really integrated with Rivian systems. I hope that there's some kind of hybrid between the two. My dream system would be something that has access to all of my Google information that can say, hey, I see you have a calendar event at this location at this time. Would you like to navigate there? And then also at the same time, have the deep integration with the Rivian system to be able to suggest things like, hey, do you want snow mode right now? We'll see if something like that happens. There's a lot of different directions that they can go with it, but whatever direction they do go with it, the integration of AI, I think, is going to make it a very cool experience. You would think that at some point I'm going to stop making these mistakes while I'm talking, but no, it appears not. I don't think I need to go into that whole thing. I mean, I could, but whatever.